Welcome to The Explainer. I am so pumped you're here with us today. We're going to be tracking a seriously fascinating evolution, the rise, the epic fall, and the really surprising rebirth of the movie soundtrack. Now, I'm actually going to skip our usual agenda today because I really want to preserve this incredible plot twist we have coming up a bit later. Let's just say, the way we consume music in movies has a deeply intertwined, highly lucrative, and honestly, surprisingly dramatic history.
Okay, let's just dive right into this with a massive secret origin story. Picture this. It's 1996. Composer James Horner is finalizing the score for this little movie called Titanic. But the director, James Cameron, is absolutely dead set against ending the movie with a commercially oriented cash grab pop ballad. He just refuses. So what does Horner do? He goes right behind his back. He secretly recruits Celine Dion, records a demo of My Heart Will Go On, and just literally waits around for the absolute perfect mood to unveil it to Cameron. And wow, did that single gamble pay off? I didn't just win over a stubborn director. It resulted in a staggering 30 million soundtrack albums sold worldwide. 30 million! My Heart Will Go On instantly became one of the defining songs of the entire decade, completely buoyed by the biggest movie ever made. Back in the 90s, the stakes and the profits were just astronomical. So how exactly did we get to a point where a movie soundtrack could casually move 30 million units? Well, let's jump into Act 1, the blockbuster soundtrack boom.
To really understand this, we gotta rewind a bit to the era where Hollywood finally woke up to the music industry's massive earning potential. In 1977, we get Saturday Night Fever. Just a year later, Grease. Then the 80s hit us with Prince's Purple Rain and that incredibly synth-heavy Top Gun soundtrack. What completely changed here is that these weren't just background orchestral scores anymore. They were rapid-fire, industry-defining pop albums. Hollywood had this light bulb moment where they realized soundtracks could literally dictate global culture.
Let's look a little closer at Saturday Night Fever. Fun fact, before Michael Jackson's Thriller came along, this was the best-selling album in music history. It sold 40 million copies globally and stayed at #1 for 24 consecutive weeks. Insane, right? But what's absolutely crucial here is what it did culturally. It took this inclusive, largely marginalized underground disco scene of New York, which was a safe haven for Black, gay, and Latino communities, and totally repackaged it into a mainstream, corporate synergy juggernaut. It essentially proved that the Hollywood hit-making formula really worked. And just to help you understand the sheer mind-boggling scale of this boom, at the absolute height of the craze, nearly 20% of all Billboard #1 hits were tied directly to a contemporary film release. Just think about that for a second. Literally 1 in 5 of the top songs in the entire country only existed because a movie studio put them there to cross-promote a film. It was a massive machine.
But, power dynamics rarely stay static in entertainment. Which brings us to Act 2. Pop stars hijack Hollywood. Savvy musicians looked at this explosive boom and realized, wait a minute, we hold the cards here. Traditionally, actresses had to navigate this brutal system of endless auditions and strict, frankly patriarchal studio oversight. But MTV superstars? They already had these massive, pre-existing, loyal audiences. They realized they could use their music influence to completely bypass the traditional Hollywood gatekeepers and secure total creative control on screen.
And honestly, nothing captures this power dynamic shift better than this legendary moment during the post-production of the 1991 documentary, Truth or Dare. The notoriously powerful executive Harvey Weinstein tried to force his own changes onto the film. Madonna's response? She just looked at him and said, "I put up the money for this movie. I don't care what your point of view is." Because her immense value came from outside the traditional film industry, she wielded the financial power to just completely shut down his interference. Total boss move.
Now, if we're talking about driving this 90s synergy engine to its absolute dizzier heights, we have to talk about Whitney Houston. Her film debut in The Bodyguard wasn't just a movie, it was essentially a delivery mechanism for a soundtrack that sold 45 million copies globally. A few years later, she does it again with Waiting to Exhale, a soundtrack that went 7x platinum and snagged 11 Grammy nominations. She was seamlessly integrating R&B and cinema, using the silver screen to amplify an already untouchable musical dominance.
This whole strategy reached its absolute peak with the Waiting to Exhale formula. Houston didn't just sing on this record, she curated the whole thing. Produced by Babyface, she assembled an absolute powerhouse lineup of Black female R&B artists. Everyone from Mary J. Blige and TLC to the Queen of Soul herself, Aretha Franklin. Together, they crafted this bespoke masterpiece that perfectly mirrored the film's themes of diverse Black womanhood and sisterhood. It wasn't just an album, it was a cultural event. Right, but in every great Hollywood script, there has to be a dramatic plot twist. Welcome to Act 3, the digital soundtrack crash.
The blockbuster soundtrack album suffered a completely sudden, catastrophic collapse right around the turn of the millennium. So, what exactly killed it? I want you to think about your own media consumption habits in the early 2000s. How did you start getting your music?
The answer, as it usually does, comes down to the economics. In the pre-2000s model, if you wanted to hear Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You, you had to drop $15 on a physical plastic CD. For the studios, that's massive, massive profit. But post-2000s, you could buy that exact single track for 99 cents on iTunes. And a few years later, you're streaming it for a tiny fraction of a cent on Spotify.
So almost overnight, the rise of platforms like Napster and iTunes completely destroyed the financial incentive for studios to produce these original blockbuster soundtrack albums. The massive profit margins just vanished into thin air. That golden, highly lucrative pipeline between Hollywood and the record labels, yeah, it was effectively decimated.
But, Hollywood is nothing if not adaptable. Which leads us straight into Act 4, the needle drop revival. Here is a totally wild stat for you. Data from YouGov shows that even today, a staggering 33%, literally 1/3 of all listeners, still discover new music through film and television. So if the studios aren't shelling out millions for original Celine Dion or Whitney Houston tracks anymore, what exactly are people discovering?
Well, they're actually discovering the past. We call this modern phenomenon the Kate Bush effect. It's this sudden rediscovery and charting of decades-old songs because of prominent placements in modern shows or movies. I mean, we all remember a few years ago when Stranger Things brought a 1980s Kate Bush classic back to absolute global dominance, right? Modern media is essentially looking backward to survive.
Because creating entirely new, original albums is just way too expensive now. Modern media relies heavily on a really specific, well-worn canon of iconic tracks to do the emotional heavy lifting. Need to show a sweeping romance? Just drop the needle on Etta James's At Last from the 60s. Need to show a wild, out-of-control party scene? Montel Jordan's This Is How We Do It from the 90s instantly sets the mood. Gritty, dark atmosphere? Cue Nirvana's Something in the Way.
And the crazy thing is, these aren't just temporary little blips on the radar. When Something in the Way was heavily featured in the 2022 Batman movie, it didn't just spike for a week. It saw an immediate and permanent surge in its baseline daily streams. These modern needle drops are incredibly powerful, introducing legacy artists to entirely new generations of permanent daily listeners. Which brings us to our final act in this evolution, Act 5, the modern pop star brand powerhouse.
The reality is, if the traditional soundtrack album is dead, the modern pop star has simply transcended the need for it. Just look at Lady Gaga's synergy model. She seamlessly integrates her acting and music. I mean, she won an Oscar for A Star is Born, but she doesn't stop there. She cross-promotes with luxury fashion houses like Versace and Tiffany. She leverages her own House Laboratories beauty line. She even aligns with tech and wellness via Apple. Gaga is the ultimate modern blueprint. She's a total brand powerhouse whose fearless authenticity drives cross-industry partnerships way, way beyond just selling a record. Honestly, she is the franchise now.
So, with streaming basically running the world right now, and the old hit-making models fading into the background, I want to leave you with this to chew on. Who is going to emerge as the next great architect of the modern movie soundtrack? How will the intersection of Hollywood film, pop culture branding, and your very own daily Spotify playlists evolve next? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope you'll look at and listen to your favorite movies just a little bit differently from now on. See you next time.